Hello and welcome to Business Lunch. I'm Nisha Poddar, and with me as always is my co-anchor Pavitra Parekh. So Pavitra, it's like many aspects that is really playing around on the market, and therefore it's looking a little tepid. In fact, our markets, Nifty 50, opened above a certain level of, expectancy and then dipped further. At the moment, it is now looking weakish in trade. And remember that lunchtime is a time of trend reversal as well. So we have to see whether there is weakness from here on. Reliance Industries, as a big boy, which really impacts the market, is the one which is slipping in trade. But Nifty 50 really flirting with the top line, 18,691 levels, though it opened above 18,700 levels today. So lower but flat on trade at the moment. Well, some of the counters which are really shining bright on the screen, and Hindalco, remember, Tata Steel, JSW Steel from the last week as well is carrying forward the positive momentum on the positive side when it comes to the metal sector. But a lot of weakness from some of the other big counters is keeping Nifty 50 below that 18,700 level at the moment. Pavitra.
Hi, Nisha. Good afternoon. So, like you said, it is a bit of a down day, but not too bad at all, especially considering the fact that we've recovered so much of the loss that we did see in early trade. So, in that context, it's looking good. I think what's very encouraging is the fact that the broader market is really, holding it together today. So, the mid-cap index, the small-cap index, they have a lot of catch-up left to do. So, those ones are really, holding it well today. In terms of what is going on in the rest of Asia, that's very interesting because you're seeing Hang Seng up almost 4%. So, that one is very strong. Across the board, Asia is seeing some good gains. For our own markets, it is really the metals which are, the top gainer. So some of the bigger names will be up for you. But that index on the back of what's going on in China is doing well. On the downside, you have tech, you have some FMCG, you have Reliance, which has actually seen quite the chart today. So that one can also come up for you. You'll see that Reliance has affected a lot of the market moves today. In terms of cues, keep your eye out, of course, on the RBI policy, the exit poll results, as well as the crude move. So that's what's happening in terms of the market action. We'll bring you back to that in just a bit. But first up, our top story. It is day 2 of the 4-day G20 Sherpa meeting, which is underway in Udaipur. Now, green development, technological transformation, as well as women-led development were some of the key themes that were discussed at this meeting. So Parikshit joins us now from Udaipur to fill us in with the latest that we know. Parikshit?
Well, yes, those discussions are taking place as we speak. We're right outside the Darbar Hall at Taj Fateh Prakash, where Sherpas from 43 countries, from international organizations like the Financial Stability Board, the ILO, the World Bank, the IMF, they're all discussing the global economic situation right now. And really, even though the G20 is not a security forum, everyone is thinking about the impact of the Russia-Ukraine war. It is squarely on the table. The economic impact of this from the side of the G7, they are very encouraged by the price cap. They all want the countries to understand that this is something that will reduce the ability of Russia to continue waging the war. And it is in the interest of countries like India. In fact, that is what the US Deputy NSA told us a short while back, that it is in very much India's interest to be able to drive a hard bargain with Russia on lower oil prices. At the same time, India is seeking a voice, a greater voice for emerging economies. Just to give you an example, here in Udaipur, there was a 2-hour-long meeting of emerging economies that took place late last evening, which went all beyond midnight. And the whole focus was how to make sure that the emerging economies, developing countries like India, can have a greater say on the decision-making of the G20 process, and not just make this about a G7 club. So that was a very important meeting. There is a discussion going on the oil price cap as well. We met the Argentinian Sherpa a short while back, and he said that, yes, they would like to discuss the impact of the war on energy, on food, fuel, fertilizers. They would discuss the G7 price cap with other nations, get their views on it as well. Several important tracks. There are 12 working groups, 13 engagement groups, and India is sharing its priorities, its views on each of the working groups. Themes such as sustainable development, women-led growth, technological transformation, lifestyle for environment, inclusive, resilient supply chains, multilateralism, food, fuel, and security. All of this is on the table, and India is seeking views of all countries on that as well. You've got the Russian Sherpa, the Chinese Sherpa here as well.
All right, Parikshit. So the whole host of things on the agenda, and thanks for getting us up to speed with all of them. There was an important flash on the screen when Parikshit was talking, and an important one for the digital revolution in the country. Meta as well as Airtel collaborate for digital ecosystem in the country. Now remember, Meta, erstwhile Facebook, is the one which holds equity stake in Reliance Jio, and now is also collaborating with another big boy in the telephony business, which is Airtel. So keep an eye out on the various collaborations in the digital ecosystem in the country. But we'll stay with the G20 summit and the meeting there, which Parikshit was enumerating all the details on. And on the same note, listen in to also the excerpts from my colleague Parikshit's conversation with the Indian Sherpa Amitabh Kant. Listen in.
Some of these issues our petroleum minister has talked at length. India has been buying oil from Russia. We are a very large country. We buy very little compared to what Europe buys, and that has been highly emphasized. We will continue to do what is in India's interest. We are a very large population. For us, it's very important to ensure that there is we are able to ensure that the citizens of India are able to get goods at reasonable prices. Energy is a very major component of ours. Our policy remains very clear and very steady.
Right. When it comes to the issue of indebtedness, China has a big role to play there. What would be your expectation from the Chinese Sherpa, the Chinese delegation?
So we continue to discuss, the G20 continues to discuss. It's a very important issue because 70 countries around the world are impacted by global debt. It's not just Sri Lanka, it's not just Chad, it's not just Zambia, but several countries are impacted. And the challenge there is that there is a debt from IMF, there's a private sector debt, and there's also debt from China. And it's important that everyone sits together, discusses, and then puts out a debt package for that country. It's not a feasible proposition that a debt package of IMF goes to service other debts. And therefore, it's very important that instead of bilaterally discussing, all the creditors must sit together, discuss, and a lot of that issue will come out, will be possible if the countries which have taken debt also stress this. And therefore, while the G20 will talk about it, it's important that countries which have taken a debt, they also play a very critical role in this exercise.
Would you be seeking a special emphasis, some sort of a special package for emerging economies, including India?
See, there can't be a package for one segment. There has to be a package for the global south. That is what the Prime Minister has emphasized, that he will be the voice of the global south. And therefore, whatever we speak, we are speaking not only on our behalf, we are speaking on behalf of the global south. We understand their challenges, we understand their problems. Amongst all the invitees, there are 6 countries from Africa, and therefore we'll be speaking their voice.
All right, that is the word coming in from Amitabh Kant on the whole Russian oil topic. He is saying that, we have been buying oil, but we will keep doing what is in our best interest. Also talking about the debt packages from the IMF as well as China. But in fact, from the sidelines of this meet, Parikshit also spoke to the Sherpas of Argentina and Indonesia on their expectations from the meet and some of the topics that could be on the agenda. Listen in.
Well, we have to face many consequences of the war in Ukraine. I'm thinking about the price of the war. I'm thinking about energy crisis, food crisis. So those are the main issues that are in the international agenda, and of course, is part of our work here in India. I think India is called to play a key role particularly this year because of the presidency of the G20. India has the full support of all the emerging countries, but also the G7 countries. So there are positive political conditions to have India playing a key role in the international arena.
The essence of the G20 is always the continuity. So that's why it still have a lot of things that we should be done, especially in the energy transition. Even we already have a principle, but we have to move forward into the implementation. For my opinions, India and Indonesia have a long relationship since the ancient time, because we also have a cultures, whatever. So I believe that India can solve the problem with the expertise in diplomacy and also with the flexibility in the current situation.
All right, so that was a roundup of all the big things happening at G20, and with that we'll slip into a short breather on Business Lunch, but lots of weekend developments to unwrap in the commodities space coming up, and oil will be in focus.
Hey guys, welcome back. You're still tuned into Business Lunch, and like we told you, the RBI's three-day monetary policy meeting gets underway starting today. Now, this meeting, remember, comes after 4 back-to-back repo rate hikes. The central bank is now widely expected to continue with rate hikes, but at a lower pace. So around 35 basis points is what the consensus estimate is. This is versus the 50 basis points that we have been seeing earlier. So here is what CNBC TV18's Citizens Monetary Policy Committee expects in terms of repo rate action, as well as what the RBI stance could be on the 7th of December. Listen in.
What is the Reserve Bank expected to do on December 7th to the repo rate? Soumya.
We are penciling in a 35 basis point rate hike.
Okay. Sajid?
A 35 basis point rate hike.
Soumya?
Same 35 basis.
Okay, this is getting easy for the chairman. Sonal?
35.
35, okay. Dr. Sen, you go with your panel or you're different?
Unanimous.
Unanimous, okay. 35 basis rate hike is what the Citizens MPC is voting for, but everyone's pointing out that the RBI may have to change the stance. The current MPC stance is withdrawal of accommodation. The stance is we are withdrawing accommodation. Will they change, Soumya?
No, I think they will keep it as withdrawal of accommodation, maybe with a little tweaks around the statement.
Sajid?
Withdrawal of accommodation with some tweaks to give the two-sided option.
So no change, no change. Samiran?
No change, not too much.
Okay. Sonal?
Withdrawal of accommodation, but with the tweaks I mentioned earlier.
Okay. Dr. Sen?
Withdrawal of accommodation with a hint towards neutral.
All right, December 7th, that's the date all eyes are on for the monetary policy. And our MPC members, they suggest 35 basis points rate hike. So RBI policy is one important aspect market is looking out for, but crude oil prices is another one. Let's shift focus to some important developments in that particular space then. Now, the G7 nations have agreed to cap the price of Russian oil at $60 a barrel, and this is aimed, remember, at limiting Russia's ability to finance its war in Ukraine while making sure that it keeps supplying the global market. Now, in response, Russia has said that it will not abide by the measures even if it has to cut the production. Separately, the OPEC Plus has agreed to stick to their October plan to cut the output by 2 million barrels per day starting November 2023. Let's now listen in to Edward Moores of Citi to really understand the potential impact of all this on crude prices going forward. And it's also, remember, politics of economics playing out here. Listen in.
The oil cap is well below where the European price is. It's above where Asian prices are, but they don't matter much in terms of the oil caps. So for all practical purposes, the oil cap is irrelevant by a good $8 to $10 a barrel. We have a cap at 60, and most seaborne crude, which is what this is all about, going into the west from Russia, is in the $50 range. So there won't be any impact unless Moscow goes ahead with its threat and says we're not going to export X amount for whatever reason. But so far, we don't think that's going to happen. And the market has not moved a lot. The market has been moving for reasons other than what's happened over the weekend. The market's been moving because of optimism about China opening and concerns about the U.S. dollar because the Fed might be reducing the pace at which it's raising rates. Both of those may be iffy, by the way. So I think we're going to have the same kind of volatility in the market that we've had, through the fourth quarter. We'll find out that China is not going to be rebounding in terms of demand until sometime after the first quarter is over. And we'll find out probably that given the other thing that the Fed reads, namely the pace of growth in the U.S. economy, that they're going to not relent on raising rates. So we'll see what happens. But I think volatility is what we should expect rather than a continuing rise in prices. Well, I look at supply and demand, and I don't know what Saudi Arabia and the UAE are going to do. I know they have a difference of view. I know they have to monetize their reserves and do that for a while. But when we look at supply and demand balances, we're looking, as we did this year, at a surplus and lower prices. We happen to have prices at the end of the year that were equal to those at the beginning of the year. They're not higher. When we think about next year, we're looking in our numbers at about 1,300,000 barrels a day of demand and 2.5 million barrels a day of incremental supply. That means that OPEC has to make a decision, the OPEC plus countries, as to what they're going to do. Now, there's plenty of margin of error because there are so many unknowns. Is Russian production going to go down? We don't think so. We think that there are going to be enough buyers found in the world, in the markets as they exist, that Russian production is going to stay more or less where it is. If it's going to be down, it won't be down by 1 million barrels a day. It may be down by 200,000 or 300,000 barrels a day. But as between the Western Hemisphere's growth, which is in itself close to 2 million barrels a day, and the unknowns associated with Libya, Nigeria, Iran, Iraq, Venezuela, we could have disruption to supply by 2 million barrels a day, or we could have an addition of 1 million. So, you know, the geopolitics of this, based on what's happening in domestic economies, is extremely hard to read.
All right, that is the word from Citi on crude oil prices, saying that we should continue to see some volatility more than just a straight-up rise in prices. But with that, let's also bring you updates from the Russia-Ukraine war. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz says that it would be a grave mistake to completely stop talking to Russian President Vladimir Putin. He says this after they had a telephonic conversation with him over the weekend and said, I quote, "This is why it is also important that the French president and I, as representatives of the G7 countries and as two NATO countries, keep seeking dialogue again, however, without any illusions." End of quote.
All right, some of those important developments globally which are going to impact the markets. On that note, as you digest each one of those macro events, well, let's slip into a breather on Business Lunch. But up next, we'll get you the latest on what's happening at the phase 2 elections in Gujarat, a big development today when it comes to the national stories. Stay tuned. Welcome back. You're watching Business Lunch, and when we look at Nifty 50, it is now losing about 22, 23 odd points at the moment. So the weakish trajectory or the flat line really continues. Reliance Industries as well as Adani Enterprises are the biggest draggers for Nifty 50. It's time to also get you the biggest national story of the day, and focus is the second phase of elections in the state of Gujarat. Now, 93 assembly seats are in the fray across 14 central and northern Gujarat districts, and important constituencies today include Ahmedabad, Vadodara, Gandhinagar and other districts. In fact, CNN News 18's colleague Arun Dharta gets us up to speed with all the details from the ground zero from Ahmedabad.
Voting for the second phase of assembly elections in Gujarat is underway. 93 seats are up for the grab, and 883 candidates from 61 political parties are trying their luck in this phase. In 2017, out of these 93 seats, BJP had managed to win 51 seats, and Congress was at 39. This second phase essentially is all about central Gujarat and north Gujarat. In the first phase, we had seen Saurashtra, Kutch and South Gujarat went to the polls. Now this second phase is very crucial because in 2017 there were 18 seats where winning and losing margin was less than 2%. So those 18 seats are going to be very crucial. Along with that, we had seen Prime Minister Modi himself coming here in his constituency, which is Sabarmati, where he cast his vote. In fact, he held a roadshow where on the both sides of the road in Ranip, people were welcoming Prime Minister Modi, and he was taking all their blessings and their waves, which people of Ranip were giving to Prime Minister Modi. Prime Minister Modi thanked in his speech of of which he addressed to media about the role of Election Commission, the way election has been conducted, and also set out a message to everyone that they should come out of their houses to cast their vote. The results will be out on 8th. We'll have to see as to which way results will go this time. In past 27 years, we have seen that BJP has been in power. Whether this time around the entry of Aam Aadmi Party will change the scenario, we'll have to see.
Arun, thanks a lot for getting us all of the details. Like you said, 8th December is when the results will be out, so we'll wait by for that day. With that, we're going to wind down on this edition of Business Lunch. Thank you for tuning in. Midcap Radar is up next.